Hi, it's Matt with State of Flux here to give you my Week 3 challenge from Everyone's a Critic. This time it's low budget, big box office. So inclination was to initially do El Mariachi or something like that. That movie was made for $7,000. But its big box office, yeah, it had a huge return. It made like $2 million, so off a $7,000 budget, that is a pretty big profit margin. But I considered big box office something over $50 million. And I also wanted to try to challenge myself to see something new, something I hadn't seen before. The previous 2 weeks were movies that I had seen, so I decided to go with something a little different. Therefore, I picked the film Open Water. Open Water was released in 2003 on a budget of $130,000, making $55 million worldwide. That is a huge profit margin there. Its aspect ratio was 1.851. Runtime, a lean hour and 19 minutes. So it's barely a movie, but it is, a movie. It is a thriller, sort of. It's kind of a genre-less movie. It's a suspense film, I guess. Rated R for a really egregious, nude scene that's in the first act, and that's pretty much the only reason it's rated R. There's some blood and stuff that you see towards the back half of the film, but nothing that wouldn't be on a PG-13 movie or a hard episode of Supernatural. No, it's just this full frontal nude scene in the beginning of the movie that's just completely pointless and distracting, and I hate it. Starring Blanchard Ryan, Daniel Travis, Saul Stein, Michael E. Williamson, and Christina Zenato. That's a fun name. Directed by Chris Kentis. Also written by him, produced by Lionsgate. They picked up his movie. Apparently this film, I was researching, it was shot over the course of a couple of years, shooting primarily on weekends. Music by Graham Revell. And the awards received were a Saturn Award for Best Actress. Blanchard Ryan earned herself a Saturn Award, and she is kind of good in the movie. Subjectively good. She's low budget good, which kind of is like a backhanded compliment. I'm sure she does have the chops because there are times in the movie she does really perform it quite well, but I feel like maybe the screenplay wasn't necessarily the strong suit there. It also won the Golden Trailer Award for Best Thriller. There you have. All right, now to the stuff that I haven't prepared. These are all fresh questions, so I'm excited to see what the answers are. Why did I choose this particular film? I wanted to see something new, and I Googled a list of the most profitable low-budget films, and I classified a low-budget film in that it had to be under $1 million. That money that it cost had to be an attainable amount. I was trying to even shoot for under $500,000. I figured if it's an amount of money that I could find a way by selling comics and stuff like that that I own to finance, then I would consider it a true low-budget movie. Had I not done a career retrospective on Kevin Smith 6 months ago, I probably would have done Clerks for this, moving past El Mariachi. But again, big box office really wasn't there. So I wanted it to be under $1 million, preferably under $500,000, with a profit margin above $50 million. And this was the one that I landed on that I had not seen before. There were other films like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Blair Witch Project. They were all tempting, but I decided to go with this because I hadn't seen it, and I'd always meant to. I have a fondness for shark films, and this is kind of that a little bit, or at least it's advertised as such. Had I seen this movie before? No, I have not. We just discussed that. Would I recommend this film? Why or why not? That's a tricky thing. I guess if you're interested in filmmaking or have a fondness for Lost at Sea / shark movies, or um, are interested in low budget filmmaking, then yes, I absolutely would recommend this movie. Its base plot is interesting. It's based on a true story, and evidently this did sort of happen. The names in this were changed, but the base scenario is accurate, which is that a couple goes off vacationing, and along the vacationing goes with a dive team. Like a boat takes them out into the middle of water to go diving collectively, but due to a misread head count, abandons these two people to the ocean, and so they're lost at sea. And this all apparently happened, as well as the conclusion of the film. Having researched it, I mean, this is all based on what the screenwriter says. But it's just one of those, like, I can't believe this happened, this is horrific kind of scenarios. But it's also, like, weirdly believable at the same time. So yeah, I guess on those levels, I'd recommend it. Is it a polished looking movie? No, I think movies like this has a higher budget than the aforementioned Clerks or El Mariachi or Blair Witch Project. Yet, I don't think this film is nearly as polished as any of those three things. And if you've seen those movies, that's kind of saying something. Like, El Mariachi looks like it's a way more expensive movie than it is, but part of the appeal of Clerks and Blair Witch Project is they feel like you've just discovered this footage of, like, in Clerks, it's like you've discovered this time capsule of grunge and middle America nostalgia kind of thing, middle class America, and with Blair Witch Project, you literally feel like you've just discovered this footage and you're watching it on a VHS tape and whatnot. So they're not meant to look great, and they did the best with what they had. This movie, I feel like, tries to do that as well, but it doesn't look as good as any of those movies. I don't know why. But yeah, so like it's not a pretty movie. And so if you're somebody who likes to be aesthetically pleased, you're not going to find it in this movie. Even when, like, they're shooting gorgeous underwater shots, there's a couple of like moments that, like, this is a well shot scene, but you could tell that it's probably a first time editor editing this film, because the shot goes on way too long, and, like, the divers air bubbles are floating up, and then just, like, that's all you see is bubbles all over the frame. And it's like, okay, you could have used about 4 seconds of this shot before all that happened, and it would have been a gorgeous looking shot, and it would have been an impressive shot in your movie. The way you have it now makes it look amateurish in not a complimentary way. And so there's a lot of moments like that. All this is discussed from the first quarter of the movie. The acting is a little hit or miss. There are scenes that are well acted, and I feel like those are the ones that are probably improvised by the actors. But whenever the actors have to read their dialogue, they can't necessarily sell it because it just kind of feels stilted. So my recommendation is, if you're interested, yeah. If this is not a movie for you, or you don't like low budget movies or amateur films, you're not going to like this movie, because this feels very much of its kind. It's just ambitious, and I guess the ambitious nature of it is where my leaning is to, yeah, I'd recommend it. Which character are you most able to identify with or connect with, and in what way? I'm not, because these characters are both kind of not great people. They're not really likable. They're just kind of so, like, first world problems deteriorating their relationship kind of thing. And then they're thrust into a situation where they have to be very real and human to survive, and whether or not they do is sort of I don't know. I couldn't really connect with either of them. I thought she was a slightly better actress than he was, so I gravitated towards her a little bit. And also, I don't know, he had a couple lines that kind of turned me off. Um, so yeah, specifically in the pseudo sex scene. There's a sex scene in the movie early on that's not a sex scene. She's just naked, and then he wants to like go all in, and then gets all huffy when she is not interested. That kind of turned me off of him for the rest of the film. Best line or memorable quote? I don't know that this had one. There's a moment where I do like what each of the characters ends up doing, but he does it first, so I'll single this out. I can't remember the exact quote, so this will be more of a paraphrase, but they fall asleep at one point in the water, and when they wake up, they've drifted apart, and they find each other. And she's talking about her leg really bothering her, so he like put goggles up and goes down and looks, and she has teeth marks all up in her leg. And he comes back up, and then she's like, he's like, "Oh, you just got bit by something." And then she's like, "Was it a shark?" And very obviously, yeah, it was a shark. And he's like, No, it must be a barracuda or something. It's good. You probably just tasted good to the barracuda." And he's trying to play it off like a joke, humoring her and not trying not to get her worried, but she keeps feeling like little cleaning fish trying to clean her wounds. And that moment kind of worked for me. That was pretty good. Also, apparently an improvisation, because the real life actress was bit by a barracuda on the very first day of filming, and they just slid that into the movie. So, were you surprised by the ending? What would you do differently? For the next minute, I'm going to talk spoilers, so jump ahead about 1 minute. Yeah, I was surprised by the ending. I thought that one of the two of them were going to make it out alive, because it says based on a true story. You'd figure that one of them would have survived, and they were making him seem like a nice dude so much that I was like, oh, he's probably going to die, and then she's going to be the survivor. And it turns out they both die. They're just never found, and that's when I researched the actual incident. According to the director, the two people were never found. They were abandoned. They went on a search party to find them 3 days later and never found them. So that surprised me. What would I have done differently? Nothing. That was effective. It was very effective. Absolutely no change with the end of this movie. The last 20-ish minutes of the movie really kind of work. So there's an electrical storm that happens, and you're thrust into total darkness, only able to see anything when a stroke of lightning hits, and that scene onwards is very, very effective. Do I feel a larger budget would make this film better or worse? With this screenplay, no budget would have made it better. You would make it look less amateurish, but the screenplay itself needed a couple more drafts. You could tell that this guy has probably not written much, and it certainly has no ear for dialogue or how people actually talk. So I think if a larger budget would have also maybe gotten a little more polish on that screenplay as well. There's a lot of things that can benefit from a larger budget. Of the movies that I've already mentioned, El Mariachi, Clerks, Halloween, Friday the 13th, Blair Witch Project, all of these movies are low-budget movies, and their low budget really helps what their accomplishment is. Whether it's the gritty nature of El Mariachi and the creativeness that Robert Rodriguez had to do to execute that film, or the black and white lightning in a bottle effect of Clerks, the low budget nature of Halloween and Friday the 13th, again, sort of thrusts creativity on you, and also bigger budget, as we see with the sequels, just means more blood and more violent kills. Not necessarily anything atmospheric, or I feel like the atmosphere of those movies comes from its low budget. The same thing with Blair Witch Project. You put any more money into that, it doesn't feel like it's a real thing. And that's the biggest benefit of Blair Witch Project, is it feels real. This movie's a little bit different of a beast, because I think the low budget of this movie definitely hurts the success. And if you look at like the critics versus audience reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, it kind of shows the divide. The audience isn't a huge fan of it because it looks amateurish. This was released theatrically, and I remember I almost went to see this theatrically because I like shark stuff. And I think I would have been kind of surprised, especially as a general moviegoer, watching this and being like, this constitutes as like a major theatrical release movie? That seems kind of questionable, because there's a lot of parts where the movie just went pixelated because they shot it in like high definition digital, like not even video. So it just like, yeah, I think a bigger budget probably would have helped a lot of those things, but so I guess, yeah, for this one case, yes. Traditionally, I think a lower budget helps you find creative solutions to problems, and not just throw money at them. But I think certain problems can really be polished with money, and this is one of those cases. How would you spend the extra funds? I would polish the screenplay, get like a ghostwriter to come in and punch up dialogue, find themes. Like, you have this marriage that is kind of crumbling. How can you tie that in thematically with the screenplay from a story aspect? Otherwise, it's just like you're watching these two people that are kind of unlikable bicker for 20 minutes and then are thrust into a position where you're having to care for them. You see that they care for each other until they get to a point where they start blaming each other again in the beginning of the third act. And none of that seemed to have a narrative thread or tie or anything. So I think extra funds would have gone towards that, and maybe hiring an editor who's a little more accomplished to peruse the shots that they had to maybe find a prettier cut of the movie, and maybe hire a more accomplished cinematographer who could avoid mistakes such as, like, you're doing an overhead shot underwater above the divers as they're going and following them in a tracking shot overhead, and the entire time their air bubbles are just flowing into your frame. Is really disruptive, and it happens more than one time in that first act. So that's where I would apply it. Like, fix a lot of the cosmetic mistakes that were there because your budget was low and you had nothing else to work with. Lastly, anything else I would like to add? There's no reason for the nudity in this movie. Absolutely none. You could still have the same scene where the guy is pursuant of the woman, and the woman is like, no, I'm not interested, and still have him be huffy and be a dick about it. You could do that same exact scene without her being 100% naked and only showing her and photographing her. He's not photographed whatsoever. You see maybe a micro thatch of hair as he's climbing into the bed, but that's it. She is shown in all of her like naked glory, and it was just distraction. And it's something that the actress went on to talk about later in an interview, saying that it was kind of a pointless nude scene, and it absolutely was. Like, I feel like that was just put in there to try to sell distribution, because at one point, and probably still, in some circles within like low budget filmmaking, if you put nudity in your movie, you can sell it for the home video market because they'll watch it, and anything with like an unrated cut and stuff like that. And I feel like that's the only reason she's nude there. And I just, like, I was watching that scene and just feeling bad for the actress and how uncomfortable that must have been. So yeah, that's, I guess the only thing I'd like to add. As far as a shark movie goes, that's, there's very little shark action in it, so advertising it as such is kind of a mislead. So I think I would have been disappointed had I seen it when it first came out. Because I remember seeing the previews and thinking, ooh, that's up my alley. As a shark movie goes, it's not really all that impressive. As a suspenseful movie where you're watching two people try to survive an unsurvivable scenario, it's pretty effective. And there's a lot of... it never feels long. I mean, it's super short, but it like never overstays its welcome, and there's enough suspenseful material trickled throughout that that it does keep you invested. So it works on that level. However, I would have excised all of the scenes of them seeing boats and then being like, we can't swim to them, the current's just taking us, and they're just very plainly staying there. If you're in a survival scenario, I don't care how far those boats seem, you'd think you'd be screaming and calling and trying to get their attention and stuff like that. And they're doing nothing, just very lackadaisically just floating, and he's just like, it's not worth it. They'll never make it in time. They wouldn't be able to see us. We wouldn't be able to get to them if we tried. And then stuff as they're just floating along. And cut those scenes out, because you're just sitting there as a viewer frustrated with them and like, if these people die, they effing deserve to die. That kind of thing. Anyway, so those are my thoughts. I give the movie 3 out of 5, or if I'm going by my own metric, I do things out of 4 stars. I do 2.5 out of 4. It's okay. I'm glad I saw it. Probably will never watch it again. Certainly not planning to watch the sequel, which my understanding has a higher budget and leans far more into the shark stuff. A little tease for next week is a film starring animals. I look forward to that. I know exactly the movie I want to do, and I've never seen it before. And if memory serves, it was even nominated for Best Picture the year it came out. So I'll hit you with that tease. Drop a comment in the comments below if you know what film I am talking about. Alright. Thanks for watching, and I guess that'll do.